Hello and welcome to the 5th edition of the Slavic Podcast. I'm your host, Gayana Torosyan. Today we will hear from a Russian woman living in our community with the family of her son, Dr. Irina Malikova, who teaches in the history department at SUNY Oneonta. Irina Malikova and I are friends across a generation because she happens to be exactly the same age as my mother, and every time we speak on the phone, she keeps repeating how much she appreciates the sound of her native Russian language, which I speak with an accent, but still better than English. Here is how she introduced herself while we were sitting in her second-floor bedroom talking about her memories of World War II.
Маликова Ирина Валентиновна, 1937 года рождения.
Malikova Irina Valentinovna, born in 1937. From her home country of Kazakhstan, she shows me a document confirming that she's a worker of the home front, which is why Malikova has the status of a veteran of World War II.
А это приравнивается к ветеранам войны. Так что на 9 мая это мой особенный праздник.
She says on May 9th, on Victory Day, her soul rejoices and people congratulate her. She says she used to get veterans' benefits in rubles and groceries while living in Kazakhstan. Malikova says she came to the United States with her husband Anatoly Andreevich Malikov to help their son Yuri and his wife Vanessa raise their children. She says after the kids grew up a little, they stayed in Oneonta, but her husband passed away a few years ago.
Ну вот, дети сейчас уже подросли, а муж мой умер. И вот я осталась одна.
In Kazakhstan, Malikova says they lived in the city of Pavlodar, but she was born in Semipalatinsk, translated as the city of 7 tents. In Pavlodar, Malikova says she worked as a zootechnician in the Regional Administration for Agriculture with her background in animal science from the Zooveterinary Institute in Semipalatinsk. Malikova shows me her photos of working at the farm.
В Павлодаре я работала в облсельхозуправлении. Я закончила Семипалатинский зооветинститут.
Malikova says her family was known in the community because her husband served as director of the Regional Veterinary Laboratory for a whole 18 years. She shows me a newspaper article from 1999 where she's featured in a photograph accompanying her family history.
А вот фотография, где я фирмовской зоотехник.
Malikova's mother was a daughter of a state councilor, which she says was only 10 steps removed from the Russian throne.
Родители очень непростые люди. По маминой родословной. Мама моя дочь действительного статского советника.
Her father was a land surveyor who was sent to Kazakhstan on a land alienation mission, that is, to parcel out land for collective and state farms.
А папа мой землемер, и у него в трудовой книжке написано инженер-землемер высшего разряда.
Valentin Nikolaevich Lukovnikov, very educated, people nicknamed him a walking encyclopedia. That's Malikova's father. In 1958, when she was a third-year student, Irina Lukovnikova married a fifth-year student in the veterinary program, Anatoly Andreevich Malikov. She shows me a photograph of the young couple looking happy and handsome. A year later, they had their firstborn Andryusha, named after Anatoly's father, Andrei. Malikova shows newspaper clippings of articles about her elder son, who started his career as a massage therapist and continued to become a chiropractor or manual therapist, as they say in Russia.
Вот все, что осталось у меня от старшего сына.
Andrei became so famous that the president of Kazakhstan, Nursultan Nazarbayev, hired him as a consultant at the presidential clinic.
К нему шли толпы людей, и он стал таким знаменитым, что даже Наш президент Казахстана Назарбаев.
Andrei's life ended early and unexpectedly from a cerebral hemorrhage, and the mother says God must have needed a chiropractor up in heaven. Malikova says her younger son Yuri earned his bachelor's degree in English from the State Pedagogical Institute in Pavlodar, but then decided to take the test of English as a foreign language, or TOEFL, and continue his education at the Central European University in Budapest, Hungary.
Решил дальше продолжать учиться и поступил.
After earning his doctorate from the University of California, Santa Barbara in 2006, Yuri Malikov joined the SUNY Oneonta faculty to teach modern Russian, Central Asian, and European history, the history of empire, as well as borderlands and nationalism studies.
Вот у них родилась дочка Анечка. Потом родился сын Владимир.
Irina Malikova smiles when she tells me how Yuri met Vanessa Ziegler at Santa Barbara. They got married and had children, 15-year-old Anna and 10-year-old Vladimir. Helping raise these grandkids was why Irina Malikova and her husband Anatoly Andreevich agreed to move to the United States. After the passing of her husband Anatoly Malikov in April of 2020, Irina Valentinovna had no way of returning to Kazakhstan.
Мы бы уже могли вернуться в Казахстан. Теперь я осталась одна.
She says she had knee surgeries and overall better medical care here in Oneonta. And back home, she says her apartment had been flooded by upstairs neighbors. The wallpaper has been torn, and the place would need a lot of repair to become livable again.
Говорят, что там соседи затапливали ее, обои все уже ободрались. Вот, так что...
Пойемте, друзья, ведь завтра в поход уйдем в предрассветный туман.
Returning to the memories of Victory Day of May 9th, the end of World War II, Irina Malikova says she spent the recent anniversary of that date sitting outside of her son's Oneonta house, singing wartime songs, then watching the parade in Moscow on TV, and remembering how it felt when the Soviet Union finally beat the Nazi Germany in 1945.
Сидела и пела, и чувствовала себя помолодевшей. А потом смотрела парад.
Singing was Irina Valentinovna's favorite hobby, which she pursued since high school. She says her choir teacher was an expert from Moscow, very demanding, and he even staged an opera with the school children. Irina had a long braid when other girls had shorter haircuts at her younger age. Even as a college student, she stood out among her friends. Since the age of 5, she says she was in charge of the family's livestock, milking the cow, feeding the chickens, and letting the geese out to graze on the riverbank.
С 5 лет я уже хозяйствовала в своем дворе, доила корову. Это была моя...
Irina Valentinovna says because seed potatoes were hard to find, she used to pick up discarded peels and looking for eyes, which she later planted and harvested small but much-needed potatoes. She says she even invented a method of attaching 2 sprouting potato tops and planting them together to grow a double-sized plant. The only difficulty was to walk the harvest home from the family's 8 fields. Only when her older brother Yuri returned from the army, missing his right leg, Irina finally got some help with those chores. She and Yuri carried the harvest in backpacks on foot, her brother walking on crutches. When Irina's brother Yuri got a cash bonus for his medals, their mother suggested that he buys a new uniform because his old one was falling apart at the seams. Yuri disagreed and bought a lady's bicycle for his sister Irina. From that point on, that's how they carried their harvest home, on a bicycle.
Он говорит, нет, я куплю велосипед. И купил мне дамский велосипед. И вот мы на этом велосипеде...
Irina Valentinovna remembers how her mother was assigned to work in a bogland, gathering peat to be used as fuel. The 5-year-old Irina was not allowed to accompany her mother at first, and generally women with small children or pregnant were never employed at peat bogs because it was harmful for their health. Irina's mother got sick with rheumatism, for example, and she was able to bring her daughter to work in the wetlands, saying that the girl knew many songs.
Меня не хотели брать, а мама сказала, она песен много знает.
There, the young Irina was assigned to look after water buffalo, and at night the women saw the green eyes of wolves that came up to their camp. The women sat around a bonfire and told little Irina to sing as loudly as she can. One time, she says, a girl took out a burning coal and threw it at the wolves. In the darkness of the night, the women sensed the smell of burning fur and heard the voice of the howling animal. The wolf pack got scared and ran away. Irina's mother hugged her tightly and took her to bed in a large tent. Irina remembers sleeping peacefully in her mother's arms. And in the morning, the women resumed cutting the peat, which Irina Malikova says was sent to her hometown of Semipalatinsk as fuel to heat the city's 3 hospitals. Semipalatinsk was a railroad hub, and during the war, injured soldiers were transported there for treatment. One of the hospitals was connected to the institute where Irina studied to be a vet technician. She remembers that the building had concrete alcoves that were used to store pickled vegetables. Irina says without the gardens, everyone would have starved to death. She remembers very vividly a skinny horse pulling a cart downhill with a large box on a platform on the cart and people bringing out their dead to throw into that box. From under the mat, she says she remembers seeing human feet sticking out. The bodies were carried to the cemetery to be buried in large fraternal graves. Terrible hunger, she says.
Вазок, тощая лошадь.
Evacuated newcomers died more often than the locals. She remembers how each house was supposed to have 3 pyramids of cow dung on the roof. When people saw those pyramids, they knew the owners of the house would survive the cold winter. The weather in Semipalatinsk was so harsh that she remembers trying to visit the neighbor's house on Christmas one year and ending up jumping from one clump of dirt to another because the wet soil near the river had turned into ice and cracked into pieces. Irina Malikova says the worst year during the war was 1943. The first 2 years, people survived on their stored supplies, but the 3rd year of the war was deadly. Many people passed away. Irina Valentinovna's family came from Ekaterinburg, formerly named Sverdlovsk. Her grandfather had founded a school where he taught history and geography. That's where the family's love for history originated, passing down 3 generations, from her grandfather to Irina's son Yuri. The same goes for names. Yuri was her brother's name, but Irina says his baptismal name was Georgi, a multifaceted name that became Yuri or George or Gosha and even Igor. Yuri Gagarin is an example, the first Soviet cosmonaut. Another remarkable memory Irina shared was a women's riot in Ekaterinburg during the Civil War of 1918 to 1920. Female workers got angry with their employers and started bashing stores and wine cellars. The Bolsheviks had orchestrated the riots, Irina says, taking advantage of the extra force of the frustrated women.
Чтобы как-то унять, в Екатеринбург приехал Колчак.
To calm the citizens down, the anti-Bolshevik supreme ruler of the country, Kolchak, arrived in Ekaterinburg. He invited a public meeting in the theater, and Irina's mother 2 days after graduating from gymnasium, showed up in the theater wearing a dress that her mother made from silk with a rippling pattern and a frilled hem.
Прекрасное муаровое платье. По низу была такая оборка, и вот
Irina says it's not true that aristocratic women were good for nothing. She says her grandma was a good fashion designer. Irina's young mother stepped down the stairs of the amphitheater and sat in the front row. Since everybody was sitting on one side of the room, Kolchak asked audience members who agreed to support him to move to the other side. Irina says her mother was the first to stand up and walk to the other side to show her support. Kolchak stepped down from the stage, kneeled down in front of the young woman, lifted the hem of her beautiful dress, and kissed it in gratitude. Irina's mother later told her family that Kolchak had soundlessly mouthed the word goddess to her.
так еле слышно, только губами прошептал «богиня». Мама была очень красивая, черноглазая.
Irina's mother used to be dark-eyed and dark-haired Olga Nikolaevna Strukova, who inherited her beauty from the aristocratic family of Strukovs. Her father was named Valentin Nikolaevich Lukovnikov, whose grandfather was a book printer. Irina Valentinovna says famous writers like Chekhov, Alexei Tolstoy, Kuprin, Maxim Gorky used to bring their manuscripts to her grandpa.
И Чехов, и Алексей Толстой, и Куприн, и Горький, и все приносили.
Her grandfather's family lived in the city of Kovrov on the river Klazma and published a newspaper named Kovrovets.
Значит, мой дедушка был, издавал в городе Коврове на Клязьме газетку «Ковровец».
Irina Valentinovna reacts to the news about Russia's war against Ukraine with regret. It's a pity, she says. Her mother-in-law was Ukrainian and did not like her too much, but we agreed to avoid politics and return to the topic of songs. Irina's memory of the journey to the peat bogs with her mother is inseparable from songs. Upon leaving home, she started singing «Прощай, любимый город», and everyone sang along. On the road, she says, she sang «Эх, дороги». When they got to their workstation, each woman offered to share a spoonful of her wheat porridge with 5-year-old Irina, who was too young to be there and did not get any food ration. The women said they needed her there to sing and to make them laugh with her funny manner of carrying bricks of peat on a shovel, skipping, kicking her feet, just like a live toy, she said.
И еще старалась ногами дрыгать, подскакивать. А все девчата хохотали так. Ну, в общем, я у них была как игрушка.
Irina Valentinovna Malikova says she appreciates the opportunity to express herself like this. As a parting gift, she sings one of her favorite songs called The Fragrant Blooms of White Acacia Tree.
Целую ночь соловей нам насвистывал, город молчал, и молчали дома. Белая акация, гроздья душистые, ночь напролет нас водили с ума. Город умыт был весенними ливнями, в темных оврагах стояла вода. Боже, какими мы были наивными, как же мы молоды были тогда.
Сад весь умыт был весенними ливнями, в темных оврагах стояла вода. Боже, какими мы были
You've been listening to another edition of the Slavic Podcast. I'm Gayana Torosyan. Today we spoke with Irina Valentinovna Malikova, whose son, Dr. Yuri Malikov, is my colleague at SUNY Oneonta, where he teaches history. Join us again next time when we continue our journey across cultures.